So first up, thanks. We've got thanks to Creative Mornings, Jade and Khan, to all the volunteers, to doing something that's, off the side of what you do every day. That's greatly appreciated. I was amazed to hear that there were number 10 Creative Mornings chapter to be opened. That's pretty awesome. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to all of you for gifting us an hour of your morning. Just a bit of housekeeping. Feel free to tweet, Insta, Facebook, on the go. If you're using your phone, I'll just assume that it's because you're really interested and you're sharing it with the rest of the world. Suggested hashtags here just in case. Add your own. We've been invited here this morning because two reasons. We're a family and we're creative. There's one person that's not here this morning. That's my other brother, Toby, at the other end. He's also very creative, but he lives in Melbourne, so he couldn't be here. My mum's in the audience somewhere. My job as the eldest child is to kick it off and set the scene. Pretty sure Elliott will make you laugh. And Sir Bodoni, lowercase g, he'll probably awe you with his vast experience. Heritage is something that makes sense to me, and I was really stoked to be able to talk on this topic. We come from a really close family, including our extended whānau. And we're also lucky that Mum's made it her career to investigate and document the history of both the Alexander and Child clans along the years. And when we got together to start thinking about how we would entertain you today, we had a family meeting. And Mum was there as well with her iPad and her dictionary and Google at the ready, which was good because actually the Oxford Dictionary description of heritage was a lot better than the Wikipedia one. So I was quite glad that Mum was there with that. And we prodded for a few stories, a few things that we hadn't been told before. And in true Alexander style, we decided to create a diagram. It was my job to put it together. And sort of narrow down what the traits were of each side of the family. The most immediate, so you'll notice this is us down here. This is Elliott on the left, then me in the middle, then my brother Toby. In common, we were brought up in a family very rich in culture. My mum on one side and my dad on the other, and then dad's parents and mum's parents. And it was a really cool way of kind of narrowing down and looking at where all those things come from. There were, of course, several discussions on how it would be designed. There's a fierce amount of competition, especially creative competition in our family. This was us taking some photos for the Creative Morning photos of people taking photos. Yeah, you get the drift. It's a good thing. Dad, being a graphic designer, is certainly a huge part of my heritage. He's a legend. This slide's really important because I think every single card that I have ever received in my whole life has been handmade. And then you'll notice the one up there, Harry 6, that's the one he's now made for my son. And that one down there on the left, that was Molly making wrapping paper for me on my recent birthday. And yeah, he's just been a huge part of it. But also until recently, I hadn't really questioned what else might have filtered its way through the generations. We grew up in a house surrounded by art. The one on the left, that's two current photos of Mum and Dad's house. The painting on the left is fairly recent, and the pictures below are by my children. But the one on the left here, the Dick Frizzell, that is, I would say, almost probably the first painting that Mum and Dad ever bought, and had a huge influence on me growing up. I think probably my early school teachers were quite perplexed as I gave them drawings of salt and pepper shakers and still lifes of really random floor plans. I wanted to be an architect for a while, which is quite good that I didn't. Don't know that anyone would have wanted to build that house. But my mum was awesome. She encouraged me to be independent. I was stoked to discover this letter recently. I don't think they could even remember writing it, which was to the headmistress of Queen Margaret College in Wellington, asking them if they would please reconsider, because they've been waiting 18 months to hear whether I could join that school. And I think what's the most coolest thing about the letter is both Mum and Dad talking about their own background and you know, that Mum was at Westlake Girls and she was the deputy head prefect and a community, yeah, anyway, that's small part of the letter. Yeah, Mum, she taught me to experiment. She encouraged me to make shops, to build huts, to make my own clothes. She didn't mind if I dyed my hair. I would rearrange my room a lot, apparently. But she also corrected my spelling and taught me the pleasure of writing and reading, which was really, and is to this day still useful, especially the spelling. This is by Grant Alexander in 1984. Dad taught me how to draw, and he taught me how to observe. This was a very fond memory I have. Family holiday in Lake Taupo in the 80s. Obviously, I was about 8. And we took our chairs and went along and sat outside a house and sketched a house. I couldn't find mine, but Dad's is way cooler anyway. And showing me how to do perspective. And then we also put together a book called Kate and the Disappearing Rainbow, which we co-illustrated. This is just the front cover. I couldn't bring the whole thing. It's massive. I used to join Dad at work in the weekends from as early as I can remember. We used to photocopy our hands. I can still remember my first trip to Studio Art Supplies, where Garnham sold me my first set of pencils. I can remember when Dad brought home a huge box of markers and asked me to draw a picture of a girl on a bike that was then used for one of his pieces of work. I remember meeting Rachel Hunter at a photo shoot before she was famous in the studio of Dave Hamilton. And I remember Sal Crisello, the photographer, seeming really hairy. And also how cool it was to model for Dad for Crucci photo shoots. Elliott, you're lucky I didn't put your ones of these up here. I grew up surrounded by the world of design, photography, styling, art, writing, music, all of that. This is how some of you may know me. I studied everything at art school. I studied everything art at school. It was also my extracurricular activity. I won a Best Award, got a job, started Studio Alexander with Dad, became a professional member of DINS and a fellow member of DINS. Worked with some really cool people, enjoyed the nice clients, learnt to tolerate the rude ones, and learnt how to run a company. It was an epic 15 years. Hard to believe it's only 2 years ago that I finished there. Then I had kids, and my values changed. To my own surprise, I found myself wanting to spend more time with my kids and be creative in my community and use my hands. And after a few months of just kind of hanging around and painting the fence and things, I stumbled into my new career of interior styling. I've swapped my life in the exciting world of corporate brand for the very new and unknown world of interior styling. I'm in my second year, and this is just a snapshot of my Pinterest board if you want to follow it. Instagram, Facebook, all the rest. I'm loving the good bits. You're tolerating the annoying bits like any career. Believe me, even if you change to another career, it still has annoying things. You focus on the good stuff. It's been super scary moving into an industry that I know little about, coming from an industry that I felt I knew a fair amount about. But that's also been exciting. What's been most interesting in the change has actually been looking back through my history, my personal history, and seeing that the skills that I'm using now were actually, they've always been there. I've just was never really thought about looking into them. And, you know, my grandma, the one there with the right in the middle in the colour, that's Christmas Day at my place. I made everyone a wreath for when they came for Christmas Day. That's my grandma. She liked redecorating a lot. And her husband, Les, on the other side there, is in the Navy. He was a really talented carpenter and also a tech drawing teacher. He used to relief teach at TGS when I was there. And he used to make most of the things that Grandma wanted to have recreated. My nana here, down here on the left, she ran a drapery and was very entrepreneurial. And my papa, who I never got to meet, he was an awesome gardener and freezing worker and general all-time entertainer by the looks of some of these photos. My mum lobbied government and grew a national community program for women, new mother support groups, which not a lot of people know about. And I just love this photo. When I left to go to Europe, my mum gave me this photo in the middle of her in Rome, and I took a photo at the same age in Rome. And then I discovered this one of Grandma, and it's kind of really cool to see the 3 generations of independent, creative women. For me, heritage has been useful to make sense of my natural instincts. When you discover what's gone before, you can feel more comfortable with your thoughts, a reinforcement that you're making the right decision for yourself. The best thing about heritage is that we're all made up of 2 immediate parents and 4 grandparents and many more great-grandparents. So if there's something you're not good at, chances your kids will get it from somewhere. This is a kind of reminiscent, really, of that shot of me dressed up. This is me making an outfit for Harry. He was a pirate. And, you know, Mum teaching my my little boy to hold a giant camera. This is my daughter, Molly. I take comfort in this when I forget to do my son's spelling practice, which happens quite often, because we're too busy building Lego or the kitchen table is covered in painting. And I know that their dad is teaching them discipline and order, and that my job is to teach them what I know and encourage them to be themselves. This is really awesome. This was recently, we went to Hawke's Bay on a family trip, which is where Mum and Dad spent a lot of time growing up. And Molly's sitting at the graveside of her namesake. I named her after my great auntie Molly. So she didn't probably get it at the time, but she'll look back on that photo later in life and she'll be pretty stoked. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to delve into your heritage and see where it might take you, and to ponder about what legacy you might leave behind. That's it from me, bro. Up to you. Yep.
Morning, everybody.
Really cool.
Kia ora. Ko Elliott taku ingoa. Māori week, chair. My name is Elliott William Alexander. Shit, I'm nervous. I never used to like my name. It's long, old school, and it's all first and last names, so everyone call me Alexander Elliott, William Alexander, and all the above. But I really like that it's in respect of my family heritage. Grant's great-granddad was Archibald William, then there was Jack William, Grant William, Tobias Jack, and I'm Elliott William. So that's kind of cool, feels good to be part of a clan. I was born in, so I'm going to quickly whip through 34 years really quick of me, so you can check out how heritage has influenced myself, try and take a different angle from Kate. And as you get older, I guess, like Kate, I've realised how much it's influenced my life. So born in Wellies, 1980. Dad was a designer, Mum was a community worker, and Kate was the cool designer sister. I went to Scots College, and that's my first day at school. I was an active outdoors kid. I had no interest in anything else except sport. So I was the opposite to Kate, like polar opposite. So I was a competitive cross-country runner. I started skateboarding at a young age. So that's probably my strongest memories growing up. But obviously Dad probably chose the skateboard or the knee pads or put me in a pink t-shirt, stuff like that. So sport was everything. But it must have been a little bit creative somewhere because it was a drawing I did, pretty Max Gimlet, if I may say so myself. And as Kate's already said, we were surrounded by art and design like 24/7. Not that I took it in as a kid, you just kind of take it for granted, your parents do stuff, whatever, you're around it. But Dad would leave us at his work, this is design works in the 80s, and we'd just get like, excuse me, dumped on the floor with like a box of pens, not just like a little box of pens, but like 5 boxes of pens, 4 pads, and on a tech drawing board, it would be like, see you later. Can't would go do work and would just be left to draw. And so they're pretty good memories. We moved to Auckland, and this is Grant opening Studio Alexander. Moving to Auckland sucked as a little kid, being 10, and you lose all your mates and stuff like that. But obviously I was still just into sport, and that was all that I cared about, and fishing. This is my granddad's tinny that he gave us when we moved to Auckland, and it lived at the bottom of our stairs, and so I just would fish. These guys would do the creative stuff. Whatever next. I went to St. Kitts College for a couple of years when we first moved here. I played the saxophone. So yeah, music again. Dad played the drums. There was always a drum kit in the house. So that was a big part of what we did. Kate played the piano, Toby played the drums. So that was another part of heritage coming through on the music thing. But still, sport was everything. I began skiing when I was really young and quickly changed to snowboarding. Pretty sure that's like all second-hand stuff. I thought it was the coolest kid, man. The olds would put me on a bus when I was in Auckland and send me on my own down to Awakuni, and I'd go snowboarding with mates down there. So music and all other sport just got thrown out the window, and I just did nothing but snowboarding. And for me, snowboarding was like my first creative outlet. It's like a bit of an expression of your style, I suppose. So that's when I got a bit of a taste for like creative stuff, because it's quite a creative sport, I think, and it's not a team sport, so it's very expressionist kind of thing. So it took me down to Wanaka, so I went to Mount Aspiring College for a couple of years, and it's it's my first year at Mount Aspiring. It's my couple of mates there. I went to a manpower gang, 6 of us. Subi, that's the back of out the back of the snow park. About 5 years before that opened, it was an Audi driving testing ground. So there was roads everywhere. So you didn't need snowmobiles, and we just used to not go to school and spend time out there. So I spent time snowboarding in Wanaka. Went to Mount Aspiring College and discovered mountaineering. Stayed for another year to do some polytech stuff, because to find good snow you had to not go on the ski fields and things, so I started to climb a little bit. It was pretty good. That was an unforgettable 3 years in Wanaka, and it's I didn't actually think I was ever going to leave that town. But yeah, a few close calls, and the reason I took some wise words from the olds, they said go to university. So you can fall back in case you really get slammed, which you kind of get slammed weekly when you're doing that kind of stuff. So I went to university, moved to Christchurch. I hit the dole while I waited until I turned 20, because I had to get restricted entrance. Naturally, I didn't get bursary down at Mount Aspiring. But I learned how to get straight A's. I actually creamed university, so obviously by the time I was 20, I was ready. But by the time I'd finished uni, I'd been doing nothing but snowboarding. I took semesters off. I'd do like 1 year and then take a semester off, then do a year, then take a semester off, so I could do the seasons in the States. And it took me to America and around the world. Oh, that's a university radio station. That's also where I spent a lot of my time. So I got a job driving these vans, which was a pretty sweet deal as a student, because it was really well paid. So I could travel, snowboard, and still cram in the university stuff. Which, trying to come back to a bit of a heritage thing, Sue and Grant, my parents spent their time travelling as well. And Grant had a job driving diggers in Scotland. I've had a job driving vans in the States, and I think hopefully that kind of thing will pass down. But all the generations have loved cars, so I've owned 11 cars since I was 15 years old. This is one of the cars I owned in the States, and it cost me $400. And it was winnings from Vegas. So that was did the American dream for a while. And a toy that's been handed down in the family, and I've actually taken a photograph of it, and I sell it as an art print on the shop, and I sign it Jack Alexander, which is Grant's thing. So it's kind of a funny heritage thing that's happened before I really figured out what I was doing. That's just another car, and that's America. America's pretty fun. That's a house in Austria I lived in for a little while. I quite like nuclear power plants. I don't know why. I just think when you're in flat Europe, you can see them from miles away. It's kind of like the big landmarks. I picked grapes in Germany, learned a bit of Russian, and then it eventually took me to Edinburgh, where I rediscovered my heritage. Half the reason I moved to Scotland for a year, I decided to stop snowboarding for a while. Got sick of living out of a backpack. So that was pretty cool because Grant's family's from there. So I spent a year there working in a bank, doing data entry and drinking whiskey, and going to Scottish weddings dressed in my Alexander tartan. Where am I up to? The family convinced me that my idea to move back to New Zealand and start a business was a pretty good one. Skipped a bit there, but yeah, anyway, came home and started Endemic World, which was an online design store, so it was only online. It was New Zealand designers only, and that was just before opening. A little random building I found in Devonport over in Auckland, and that design was our point of difference, so that was our homepage back in 2008. That's Trade Me's back in 2008, just to give you a feel of what other sites looked like. My brother would help me out, and back in 2008, that was when cameras were first on your laptops. It was like constant photo booth, you know, awesome. So a lot of that shit going on, digging through the photos. We self-taught. We taught ourselves everything, and I guess that was also just under the wings of Kate and Grant. I'd never done photography, it was all taught. Those guys taught me everything that I know now when it comes to the creative stuff. But competition in the recession meant we had to change the business really fast to keep the growth curve going. We successfully relaunched in 2012 as an art print store, removing all the other categories and the New Zealand positioning. And since we've never looked back. In 2 years from that, we now sell originals, provide a one-stop shop distribution service for artists. We're a fine art printer, a wholesaler, and we also create our own art prints in-house, which this is one that's quite popular, and we just did it on a whim on sort of, Friday beers. It's a bit of fun type stuff, which is, I guess, one of the things I'm starting to realise, that my creative stuff's coming out, even though I'm not a designer. And I don't call myself a designer. I'm not a curator. I'm not any of those things that other people call me. I probably am more business focused, I suppose. I'm very commercial minded, and my job's to sell art. So I'm actually a salesman, if you know what I call what I do. So yeah, that's endemic. Yeah, and so a month from now, we move into a bigger space in the same building. We've got a big waiting list of artists, and we're definitely a serious outlet for some emerging artists here and in Australia. So that's pretty exciting stuff. So to somehow bring it back to heritage, I guess the sole reason for my career path is because of my family's influence. They taught me about art and business. I didn't study art or business. I didn't plan to be in an art business, but here I am. And just to quickly touch my personal life and heritage, I live in an old 1940s Navy house, kind of like, I suppose, what my granddad would have lived in when he migrated here. Just like my granddad, I have a pumping veggie garden. He used to as well. They used to fish a lot. They were both sort of early bird, dirty sea dogs. And so am I. My other passion is fishing. So here's a couple of fishing shots. Just a couple. Fishing's fun. It's a fold-up boat. It's pretty cool. And then that's finished there, which is Hawke's Bay. We grew up fishing, and that's 3 generations doing the same thing. So yeah, that's now Grant's turn. That's me and heritage and stuff.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Elliott. So I'm going to go through, well, it's a bit echoey, so I'll get used to it. Very quickly through my past, just a little bit of work before I talk specifically about heritage. About 2.5 minutes, yeah. So in the beginning, 1950, the design student years, the class of 69. Every young designer wants to be a famous photographer. I was no exception. Vinyl was in. We designed covers. We did a little drawing. I won a design award. I designed one of the ugliest logos in the world, and that won me an award. Yeah. I went on to design covers at Designscape magazine in Wellington. Yeah. This was 1970. Yeah. Then the big OE, a lot of us, we took off. We wanted to, change the world. I took off, went to London, and this young Kiwi guy got a good break. I landed a job at Nova magazine working for David Hillman. He was a graduate of the London School of Printing. He went on to become a Pentagram partner, and I learnt more from David in 2 years than I learnt from anybody else, either previous or since. I work with famous great art directors, great typographers, great stylists, great writers, great cartoonists. Hence the cartoon t-shirt I'm wearing today. I always loved cartoons. I learned to handle type. This is all hot type. The headings were all computer set, and all the small type was hot type. Yep. So I learned to manipulate type early on. I came back, joined the Listener. Again, worked with some wonderful people, Robin Morrison, Tom Scott, Burton Silver, some great writers, and that was a great 2 years. But it was going nowhere. I was bored. I was fighting with the editor, Ian Cross, fantastic guy, gave me a break. But in the end, it drove me crazy. I went freelance. This sort of was the low point. I designed this. This is Burton Silver, a famous New Zealand cartoonist. We did this in the Muldoon years. Yeah, this is Piggy. Yeah, striking out. The business of graphic design. This is me. I thought our Apple labels were really cool, so this is my first business card. I then joined Publication Graphics with these three guys, so Trevor, Ray, and myself. We then co-founded DesignWorks between us, and I was involved mostly in art direction and work for fashion catalogues. Some of my early sketches. Yeah, and on the far right, this is one of Kate's early assignments on the right-hand side. Worked with some great photographers. Went on assignment to Tokyo, working with American models. Worked in Australia. It was a great time. Did work for the Wool Board, fashion work. And pre-internet days, there were designers. There was a group around the world called Mail Art, and we would just send stuff to each other around the world. Little pieces of design work. These are just two examples. We never knew the people we were sending it to. It was just a mailing list, and you did art and you sent it to people. And in return, you got art from people from all parts of the world. So I can employ, if you want something to do, start a mail art thing, Send people stuff in the mail. It's cool. It's good fun because you get stuff from people. The DesignWorks promotional stuff. This is one of the first pieces of promotional work for DesignWorks back in the early 80s. Bad clients, bad work, 3-hump camel, too much input. Great photographer. I used to work with a bit, John Crawford. This is an identity for him. My first drawing using a Mac in 1983. The first Best Design Awards logo. A T-shirt for a yacht crew. The boat was called Brunelleschi. Before and after. In fact, that's wrong. I've done that deliberately the wrong way around because, in fact, the best one is the one at the bottom, which was the original that DesignWorks designed. I was involved in signage and all sorts of environmental programs. Most of you are familiar with this program. And then it was cheerio to DesignWorks. That was my farewell card. And then it was striking out with Kate. We started Studio Alexander. Kate and I designed this poster together and headed off to Sydney to a conference. I've always encouraged the designers I work with to look around you. Found objects. This is wonderful stuff. Every Christmas you get these things happening. People advertising Christmas stuff. And found objects like kiwis. I think I got an envelope with Grant and Confidential written on it one day, and I knew it was in it. And so this cartoon helped me come to terms with it. 10 years ago, thinking about the flag, is it design or is it colour or is it both? This is just about a colour provocation. Book design, I've always done a bit of book design. And then here all of a sudden we've got this rock and roll. This is a band called the Ligatures. And it's not really a rock and roll band. It's the Massey Type 4. This is the design studio members that I work with. These are the designers that work at Studio Alexander, pretending to be a rock and roll band. Yeah. And this is some of the work that this talented team have done in the last 6 months. It's just 2 projects. This is the poster series for the Basement Theatre, New Zealand premiere of the American play, The Motherfucker with the Hat. It was a pretty challenging piece of communication. We had to do two versions. This was the non-public version, and then MoFo was the public version. But a great piece of work. This team, a very talented team. We also went on to do recently this piece of identity for Karen Wilson. He's a well-renowned furniture designer, craftsman, who lives north of Auckland in a studio at a place called Pukaruru. Posters that we have done, and I'm not sure whether Alice has made it this morning, who's part of our design team. But Alice and Sam have worked on this. Karen is part Māori, and he embraces his Māori heritage, and so we encouraged him to wear his brand story that we wrote for him. Yeah. So digitally, he has the moko, and his brand story figures on his face. The website, and here they are again. Okay, so this brings us back to heritage. I'm lucky enough to work with young people, and as a result, from time to time, I think I'm often more part of that generation than my own generation, because I spend more time with people of this generation. So the point is, you as you go through life, you can actually choose which generation you're actually part of and which generation you feel most part of at different times. And so that's the point about this. So back to heritage. My generation and my parents' generation have done a pretty crap job of looking after heritage. Most of our pioneers came here from the UK, and they came here to forget. They'd left bad memories back in the UK, most of them. And as a result, they were very poor at acknowledging current heritage. This is just two of the things that we've, the buildings. I know this is just physical heritage, but it's physical heritage that is assigned. So we'll need a fair bit of rigour on behalf of Generation Y and Generation X to make sure that you hang on to physical heritage, because there's lots of pressures not to. Yeah. Back to the beginning, you saw pictures of Sally and Jack earlier on, my parents. Well, these guys, this is 1940, 10 years before I was born. And while these guys were growing up in Hawke's Bay, and I was born there and had a wonderful time there. And here I was picking apples, thinking that our apple labels are the best in the world, until I came across this little beauty. An American apple label, which is based on European standards, but just a lovely piece of design. So New Zealand designers, creative people, I encourage you to acknowledge who put the iwi in Kiwi, yeah? Because as New Zealanders, there's one thing that's unique about us, yeah, in this country, and that is our Māori heritage. So I don't think you can spend too much time finding out about why that is, yeah? But if you do want to sort of speed it up, I can encourage you to read this book by Michael King. If he'd still been alive, he would have been Sir Michael. He wrote several books, but this particular one, this is the second edition of Being Pākehā. So, and he'd been a pioneer in terms of describing what it means to be a Pākehā Kiwi. Yeah. But my particular whānau, Irish on the left, my mother's parents were born in Ireland. On the right, my father's parents were born in Scotland. So, and in the middle, my New Zealand heritage. Yeah. And appropriation. So here we have a wonderful piece of art by Component, who's an Auckland artist. He's appropriated Gordon Walters, who in turn appropriated the original Māori pattern. Yeah? So there's nothing wrong with appropriation, and this does, for me, feel like a good, strong piece of New Zealand art. However, there is bad appropriation as well. So who would trust an Irish pub that only sells bad Dutch beer? Yeah? Yeah. And as designers and creative people, you will know how hard it is not to judge a book by its cover. Yeah? This is one of the ugliest covers I've ever seen in my life. Yeah? But I happen to know the author. He's a local guy. This is the second of a three-part series of fiction based on fact, accounts of James Cook coming to New Zealand and discovering New Zealand. And the reason that I implore you to read books like this is that it does actually help you understand what it was like for that guy way back in 1769 when New Zealand was discovered. So I got to thinking, what else was going on in 1769, And then I thought, well, this wonderful typeface was being designed by Baroni, yeah? So only 29 years after New Zealand was discovered by Cook, this typeface was designed in Italy, yeah? And as a result, you've got the beauty of both. You've got the typographer and the geographer, yeah? Who's most important? They're both important, but the contrast, as creative people, finding contrast is really what life's all about. I snapped this in Positano in 2005. This typeface is based on a Bodoni derivative. Yeah? This sign could be 10 years old or it could be 200 years old. It's probably about 20. It's too clean to be more than 20. but the typography suggests 150 years old. So here's the wonderful typeface, Bauer-Bodoni. There's not a more beautiful face in the world, and the famous G. This is another typeface designed in New Zealand by Neil Partington and his team at iWork Design in Wellington in the year 2000 for the Parihaka exhibition. For anybody that doesn't know about Parihaka, the art of passive resistance and the history of Parihaka, I can recommend you actually read up on it, bone up on it. It's a wonderful New Zealand story. And this typeface that Neil designed was based on Maori manuscripts. Those original Maori manuscripts would have been based on European type design. Yep. So, Captain James Cook and Giambattista Bodoni. Or is it the other way around? I think this is Cook. Most of you know this is Cook. But the important thing is that both these guys were doing things interesting, you know? They were both doing things important. And so that's why I've had them both here today. And you know, this guy's been staring out at us from our currency for many years, so we're used to seeing him around. We're not as used to seeing this guy around, unless you're an actual specialist typographer. But they're both equally important, yeah? We've got the geographer and the typographer, yeah? So here we have a piece of geography, or is it a piece of typography, yeah? Yeah, geography, typography, yeah? So, you know, as creative people and designers living and working in New Zealand, I encourage you to embrace the paradox, yeah? Search out the links, you know, between important milestones of history and what makes Aotearoa so tantalisingly beautiful and different. Mix it up. Find out what heritage means to you personally, why you feel the way you do about living in Aotearoa, yeah? And just, that's it for me on heritage, but there's just a couple of little things here, couple of very quick lessons. Never believe what you read in advertisements, yeah? Yeah. And okay, it is 5 years old, but I'm 64 and I'm still learning how to be a designer. And as designers, you'll mostly appreciate this. Always plan ahead, right? Yeah. Even though this person was probably, English was the second language, you know, irrespective, you've got to plan ahead. Okay, so thank you very much. This has been most enjoyable. Thank you for the privilege. There may be time for questions. And please stay and read the credits. And nothing bugs me more than people who leave a movie before the credits are run. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.